Oh. Oh no. Hey everyone, John from Nintendo Life here, and I love Tetris 99. It is up there with Breath of the Wild and Odyssey for me. I love this game so darn much, and now I'm kind of scared that Mario's doing the exact same thing. This is not good for my productivity. So as a seasoned Tetris and Mario player, allow me to give you 25 tips to see your way through to first place. Tip number 1. This isn't regular Mario. Change your playstyle. The original Super Mario Bros. Is kinda muscle memory to me. I feel like I could play through this game blindfolded, but playing like that will surely end in defeat. The core focus of this game is defeating enemies and collecting coins. Every time you stomp an enemy, it gets sent to the person that you're targeting. And if you get 20 coins, you get this roulette power-up, and if one of those is a Starman, then, well, that's a lot of enemies going their way. So the point is, this is an offensive version of Mario 1, and it's worth taking the time to collect coins, collect power-ups, and take down enemies. What is usually an obstacle is now an opportunity. Utilize them, don't just run through. Alright, so we talked about targeting, but what's that all about? Well, if you've played Tetris 99, it's basically the exact same, but allow me to explain them anyway. So tip 2. If you flick the right analog stick up, down, left, or right, you'll change your targeting mode. The default one is random, so basically stomping on enemies is going to send them anywhere, doesn't matter where they go. But the best thing to do is target a single person and stay on them. But here's a very useful tip. The attacker's function is one of the most versatile in the entire game. Basically, if someone's targeting you, anything you stomp goes back to them. So that's pretty defensive, but it goes way beyond that. If 2 people are targeting you, then anything you stomp goes to both of them. And if there's 5 people targeting you, then, well, you can guess, it goes to all of them too. This is such a useful feature. So being targeted is not a bad thing at all. If anything, you want to be targeted. That's how you really dish out some damage. Okay, how about another targeting tip? Tip number 3. Pick out the weak and the vulnerable. So the very top option is to target the lowest time. All the best players will be stomping a ton of enemies and collecting all this time, but the weaker ones, yeah, they'll be a bit low. So if you're targeting them, there's a very good chance they're not the best at Mario and you may get an early KO. Doesn't feel particularly good, but a kill's a kill. Alright, tip number 4. So what about the other targeting mode, most coins? When's the best time to use that? So basically what this does is it targets the person with the most coins. Pretty self-explanatory. This is pretty useful if you're stuck in a pinch with no power-up, as this basically gives you a bunch of free coins. But the downside is others may be doing this too, which means if the person you're targeting is in attack mode, there's a very strong chance they'll be unleashing a bunch of enemies not only to you, but everyone else targeting them. So it's a risky move, but the payout is big. Okay, so those are the basics of targeting, and there will be a few more targeting tips later on, but for now, tip number 5. If you want more time, consider stomping rather than using a fire flower. Fire flowers are great for getting rid of large crowds, especially when there's not much room to jump around in, but they only give you 1 second of time per kill, whereas stomping gives you 2. Not saying never use the fire flower, it's a very useful item, but stomp when you can. And going off that, tip number 6, multiply your jumps. Every single time you jump off one enemy and combo onto another, you get another second of time on top of that kill. So if you can, hold down the jump button and keep comboing off one enemy to the other like they're trampolines. That's going to give you so much time. Tip number 7, the Power-Up Roulette Stacks. Basically, getting 20 coins gives you a random power-up, whether that's a mushroom, a fire flower, a starman, or a power block. But you don't need to use it immediately. Getting 40 coins gets you another one, getting 60 coins gets you a third one, getting 80 coins gets you a fourth one, and so on and so forth. If you're Big Mario or Fire Mario and you know the stage has a Starman, as long as you're in good shape, don't feel the need to use that roulette wheel. Tip number 8, don't just focus on Goombas and Koopas. Piranha plants can be deadly little things. Taking the time to wait for them to come out of a pipe is worth it because sometimes these can be the easiest kills. Likewise, Cheep Cheep can be very unpredictable. Focusing on broader enemies is one of the easiest ways to win Mario 35. Tip number 9, grab those 1-up mushrooms. A 1-up gives you 20 coins, which is essentially a free spin. You can even get one right here in 1-1. Tip number 10, even though levels are random, warp zones can still be accessed. Rather than giving you some random level, it gives you a choice of 3, and this can come in very useful. Let's say you have no coins in your small Mario, then go to 1-1. That's a really easy way to build yourself back up. Tip number 11, go to Bowser's stages if they're available. This may sound daunting, but it has a really high reward. Defeating Bowser will send him back to your opponents regardless of what stage they're in. This can be deadly, so if you're prepared, take the plunge and defeat Bowser whenever you can. Tip number 12, watch your opponents. This is much easier to do when you're down to the final 5, but watch what levels they're in. If someone's in a castle, then target them and unleash some piranha plants. Sometimes they can't even jump over them because the space is so small, so if they're small Mario, that's a KO. Likewise, send Cheep Cheep and Bloopers to grasslands because they'll fly rather than swim. Far more deadly. But how do you choose who you target? Well, tip number 13, you can manually target by using the touchscreen or the left analog stick. Touchscreen's a bit easier because you just go bloop, but the left stick will basically cycle through all your opponents. So if you're in the final 5 and you see that everyone's Fire Mario apart from this guy, then, well, bloop. And tip number 14 kinda goes against everything I've ever learned, but if you're Fire Mario, still pick up a Fire Flower. In the main games, this just gives you points, and points don't really do anything. But in Mario 35, these will give you 15 extra seconds of time. They're definitely worth picking up. And speaking of time, tip number 15. Where you land on the flagpole gives you more seconds of time. The top gives you the most, the middle gives you a bit, and the bottom only gives you a teeny tiny bit. For what it's worth, warp zones also give you time, but it's the equivalent of landing in the middle of the flagpole. Tip number 16. If you're in a level with a hammer bro, take them out if you can, even if it costs you a power-up. These guys are the most deadly obstacle in the entire game, so if you send them to someone, well, they're pretty much doomed. But make sure this isn't gonna kill you. Number 17. You can go into a game already powered up. Basically, all the coins you earn throughout all of these games accumulates, and in the main menu there's an overall coin total. Before you start a game, on the right of the screen, there's some options to spend some coins and start the game powered up as Super Mario, Fire Mario, and Starman Mario. It won't really decide the verdict of the game, but if you're coin rich, may as well get some power-ups. Tip number 18, you can get even more coins by doing the daily challenges. Much like Tetris 99, every single day brings across some new challenges. Simply by playing and clearing them, you get a bunch of coins. Tip number 19, if you're one of those ruffians who jumps with A and runs with B, you can flip the controls in the options menu. It doesn't have to be Y and B. Tip number 20, okay, we're getting there. So if you're in the final 2, you can play your opponent. If you have a lot of time, simply wait it out. If you're not stomping on anything, then you're not giving them anything. You can starve your opponent, but you do have to be clever because... Tip number 21, don't be idle for too long. If you just sit there not stomping anything at all, your clock is gonna tick down. So the game does punish you if you don't do anything, but you can balance this out. And tip number 22, very similar. If you're in the final 2 and you're in a place with a Starman, or you feel like you might get a Starman in the roulette wheel, wait for them to give you a mass build-up, and then unleash. Tip number 23, now this one's pretty rare, but you can send back the fireballs if you defeat them with a Starman. This means fireballs can spawn in the grassland and underwater and any other deadly place. Tip number 24, it's okay if you die to the first Goomba. I know that sounds embarrassing, but literally every single game I've had, with no exception at all, someone has died to the first Goomba. So if that happens to you, don't let it get to you. Literally happens to almost everyone. And tip number 25, get the most out of it while you can. Much like 3D All-Stars, the game's being delisted in March, but unlike 3D All-Stars, there'll be no ability to even play this game. This is a phenomenal concept and I adore it, so please, if you enjoy this, play as much as you can now because this may be all the chances we get. There's a possibility they may extend the period, but we really don't know. So if you enjoy this, spend all the time you can right now. But still do your job and eat and sleep and, all that stuff. So, do you have any Mario 35 tips of your own? Let us know down below in the comments, and target that subscribe button for a lot more on Mario 35, the Switch, Nintendo, and everything else that is good. We'll catch you next time. Bye.